Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I'm very excited to have this guest. My guest today is somebody that I met through one of our other guests, actually. If you've heard the show with Nathan Gold, Claudio and Nathan go way back. And because I know Nathan, I got to know Claudio, and I'm very happy I did. If you haven't heard the session with Nathan Gold, it's fabulous. Go find it. And the person who's with me today is somebody who dreams of a world where dull presentations don't exist. And that's why he helps people create engaging presentations that resonate with audience members and motivate them to take action. And his name is Claudio Sennhauser. Claudio, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, John. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. So you can find Claudio at claudiosennhauser.com. That's CLAUDIOSENNHAUSER. Did I spell that right?
Yeah, but it's without the first name.
Oh, it's not the Claudio.
Sennhauser.com. Right.
Sennhauser.com. All right. So listen, now my lack of an editor becomes obvious, but it's so much easier. Sennhauser.com. Sennhauser.com. And you can find him on LinkedIn. We'll put the link in the show notes. We'll put his website in the show notes. Claudio is a presentation and communication coach, and he's very good. So, Claudio, you are, just to give people context, you actually live in Thailand, a couple hundred miles east of Bangkok. Is that right?
I do. I've been living here since 2008. And I'm really having a blast. And, with technology today, it just doesn't matter anymore as much where we live. I can do my job as well from here as I could from, sitting in the middle of the Silicon Valley, as long as I'm flexible with my time and I'm willing to do some night shifts here and there. It's all good.
Yeah, it's really, so you were pandemic before it was a thing.
Indeed. I started to use Skype in about 2005, and I have been coaching people on Skype, since I moved to Thailand in 2008. And it almost seems like with the pandemic, the world has just caught up to me and to people like me in terms of, our mode of operation, how we meet and how we work.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And, one of the things that I have learned from Claudio, who's also, I think, been an influence on Nathan, and Nathan has been an influence on Claudio, is just another level, yet another level of really showing up powerfully on video. So if video is something that you do very much of, one of the things Claudio turned me on to for Macintosh users is Ecamm Live. And that gives me the opportunity to make it look like I'm practically broadcast television with, fades and bumpers and all that kind of stuff. And if you're on a PC, I think it's OBS Studio or something. Is that right, Claudio?
OBS Studio is a very good choice. And OBS Studio is an open software. So that actually you can download it for free, play a little bit with it, and then see whether it works for you. The learning curve for OBS is it's a bit steeper than what you just have gone through with Ecamm, because Ecamm is so well designed, but again, that's only available for the Mac. So on the PC, there are other alternatives. There are applications like which is a strange name for an app. It's spelled MMHMM.
Oh, that's funny.
and it does similar kind of things. So basically, what these tools allow you to do is to put your best foot forward in terms of presenting yourself not just as an image, but also to bring in overlays and make it really interesting and engaging for the people that are listening to you. And to me, what's so amazing about all of this technology is that gamers have been using this for quite some time as well. Uh,
Yeah.
streaming live games is a big thing. And in the beginning, when I started to take this really seriously at the beginning of this pandemic, I watched so many of the gamers just to get ideas about what kind of tools can you use in your online meetings and how do you set yourself up in a way that you sound good and that you look good, because to me it is absolutely critical. So the big advantage we have right now is we don't need to dress up physically. As long as you're putting on a good shirt, you are pretty much ready for your online meeting.
Yeah.
So what has happened though is that I see a lot of people basically just switching on their webcam and they're entering a meeting. They're not making any eye contact with the camera, which kind of like breaks the entire rapport down. And so one of my great joys at the moment is to help people to create a better on camera or on screen presence. As a matter of fact, you just mentioned Nathan, and we are going to put up a 4-week coaching program where we are holding people's hands and go week by week adding to the online persona or the presence that people have, because I really believe that it becomes so important. Today, it's probably a competitive advantage if you look
Oh,
good in
yeah.
your online meetings, but in the future, it will be a competitive necessity.
I totally agree. And I think that obviously keynote speakers, people who are presenting, people who are pitching, a lot of money has been raised throughout this pandemic. And the vast majority of that money has been raised through virtual pitching. And I've been very focused on that as one of the aspects of the things that I do, is helping people with their virtual pitches as they're raising money in Silicon Valley and beyond. And it really changes things when you can't get together in person. There's that much money and future on the line. And then how you show up and how you think about how you're presenting, and things like looking in the camera, and the things that you and I, Claudio, teach people all the time, like the power of your stories and that necessity to be truly authentic. All of that stuff just matters vastly more when it's all in this virtual realm, because we don't get to, run the sniff test with each other in person.
That's exactly it. Absolutely. So it's a new medium, and to me it reminds me a little bit to my beginning days. Before I did this coaching, I was a technology evangelist. And
Yeah.
I started actually my career very early on. I was selected as an apprentice at the NCR in Switzerland. I'm originally from Switzerland, at
Uh-huh.
the tender age of 15 years old. So I've been
Wow.
I've been in the computer industry and pretty much had a front seat to the bleeding edge of technology and the most innovative kind of products. So, for example, in 1987, I was responsible to introduce office automation to the Swiss market. Like at that time, a modern office had maybe an electric typewriter, and that was about it.
I mean,
And
I remember when those first came out, and it was a really big deal.
absolutely. And so in 87, the first PCs just came out. We didn't use PCs at that time. This was
Yeah.
based on a Unix server with workstations on it. But what was so amazing to me is when I watched, especially executives and the higher ups in an organization, when I watched them use these technologies. For example, the mode of operation at that time was an executive would receive an email, his admin would print out the email so he can read it on paper, make
Yeah.
comments, and then give it back to her, and she would compose a response to that email. And I was just walking around and was like, look, people, I know, with all due respect, I'm a very, very young guy, but there is one thing you have to understand: in the future, you will be doing all these things yourself. And of course, today, nobody's printing out emails and making notations on the emails and then going back. We have gotten used to working in such a new way. And right now, the time that we are going through reminds me a lot on that, where I believe in just a few years from now, we will all have to become more literate when it comes to online communications, and we will set up our own little studios, and it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. You don't need a lot of space. This is one of the things that Nathan and I, we went in lockstep, kind of improving our setup. And Nathan has quite some space available, and he basically went the route of, let me just get anything that I need. And on my side, my space is a little bit more limited. And
Mhm.
so I was like, you know what? I'm also a minimalist. I don't want to have 3 screens in front of me. I don't want to have 5 different lights shining onto my face. So my thing was to build myself a really, really nice environment with good light, good sound, but on a very minimalistic kind of setup. So I believe that we are all moving there, where, projecting slides next to us instead of doing a screen share in Zoom, and all those kind of things will become a necessity. And if we don't learn these tools now, we will somehow be left behind in the years to come. I believe that very, very strongly.
And the one of the things that had me just jump onto the Ecamm bandwagon was when I saw Nathan and then you be able to pull your own slides up and not disappear into that teeny thumbnail of a video in the gallery and now all of a sudden any facial micro expressions or any face movement or anything I'm doing in video matters not at all, and the thing that's up on everybody's screen is just that PowerPoint thing. And when I saw what you do and Nathan does, I'm like, I got to do that because now I can bring my keynote presentation up into my own video window so I can be spotlighted and pinned, and then people can still see my slides, but they get to see me and what I'm bringing to it. And I think that that is something that that's really obvious for someone like you and me, because we know how important it is to people to see us and our gestures and our facial expressions and things. I don't think very many, I mean, I think very, very, very few leaders in corporate America and entrepreneurs who are out raising money and things like that have any idea this is even possible, have any idea how important it is, and have any idea that if they did this, it would turbocharge how they showed up, especially right now compared to everybody else. And I don't think that that's something that's going to catch fire as quickly as maybe it should. So I think that will be an advantage for anybody that jumps on that, maybe because they heard our call and starts to really take how they show up in video to a next level seriousness. I think it's going to be a pretty long time before people catch up with that in general.
Indeed, indeed. And, it's up to us, I think, to help them and guide them in the right direction, right? And say, look,
Yes.
you would not stand as a leader, you would not stand in front of your company or your team in a pajama in the real world, right? You wouldn't do that. You do
Mhm.
take care, you comb your hair, you put on a shirt
Yep.
and some slacks,
Right.
and the online meeting, it's basically dressing up in a way that
It's a
also shows respect to the other person, right? Like
great
if I'm
point.
just looking so totally horrible, with maybe some light in the back of me, so people don't even see my face. It's just one dark shadow. Do not care about the audio. And it took me a long time and a lot of assistance by Nathan, as a matter of fact, to get my audio to a level that I find satisfactory. I'm still not quite there yet. And again, I'm dealing here with a room with tiled floors and lots of glass and a very, very high ceiling. And that gives me this cavey sound in the room. But at the moment, I'm somewhat happy with how far I've gotten it. And probably my next investment might be actually the microphone that I'm looking at in your screen right now, John. This to me
I'm
is
glad I
like
did it.
the Rolls Royce.
Well, and I just barely upgraded to this microphone, and I kind of wonder if you're listening to the podcast and you noticed a difference at some point. It would be interesting to me to know if you even noticed. But this was what really dawned on me too, Claudio, because I'd been thinking of, I mean, I take great care with my online presence, and I show up in video well. I got the lights set right. I had a good camera before, or I mean, a good microphone before, but boy, when I compared the microphone I had to this sound of this microphone, I was like, okay, maybe no one will even notice, but they will notice. They may not consciously notice, but they will notice.
And that's exactly it. And your one of your specialties, I think, is to really understand and make people aware how we process communication unconsciously, whether it is
Yep.
verbal or whether it is body language and nonverbal communication. We really process it unconsciously. Like when you are talking, I'm not sitting here and go like, oh, this is a neat gesture, and look how he moves his eyebrows right now for impact, and oh, here comes a noun and there is an adverb, and look how he puts it. No, we basically just process all of this and also generate language on an unconscious level, right? So
Yep. Yes.
once you have taken care of the entire setup and looking good, sounding good, of course, then it's again time to get back to the actual message and how you talk like a leader, right? How
Right. Right.
what do you do? What can you do? And one of the examples that I often bring up is sometimes it's just a small little change of perhaps one word. Like it's rooted in the English language. Again, we generate it unconsciously. So I hear this a lot where somebody says to me, Claudio, I want to talk to you about blah 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 blah, right?
Uh-huh.
And if you just shift one word there, just one word,
Can I guess the word?
please do.
Claudio, can I talk with you?
You got it, right? And all of a sudden you're making it so much more inclusive. And it's not this, I'm gonna talk to you, and you're gonna, from this dominant position. And
Yes.
it's small little shifts like this that I spend actually most of my time.
Yeah.
Once we get somebody to have an acceptable setup, to say, okay, now let's look at the language and how can we use the language in a way that makes people way more receptive to a message. And of course, you are a pro, so you're looking at this and you say, yes, of course, talk to versus talk
But
with is
yes,
a no-brainer, right?
yes.
But
Once
so
you're
many
aware of it,
people,
right?
exactly, so many people, they are not consciously thinking about communication the
Right,
way you and I do, day
right.
in, day out. They learned how to talk as little kids, and they
And they're
adopted
off.
all
Yeah.
kinds of things. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Claudio, I have a saying for you around that because there's a few things that I got really focused on with my Live Like a Leader group, and that is an example of them. One of the other ones that I like to point out to people is just how badly we misuse and but, right? Claudio, I like you, but I hate it when you play your music so loud. Okay, well, but just canceled out everything I said before. So the I like you is gone. And now we're stuck with the loud music. But if I say, Claudio, I like you, and I hate it when you play your music loud, like they're still both there, right? And so here's one of the sayings that I like around this stuff. Small hinges swing big doors.
Ooh, I like it.
That's
I
a good one.
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hey, and before we go too far, we
Hmm.
talked about video here. I do want to say, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but I'll go ahead and say it, and you tell me if you agree or disagree.
Hmm.
When I talk to people about the first step of really amplifying their online leadership presence, because now your leadership presence is almost all about your video presence, I tell them, don't get a new camera. And you don't need some new presentation software. Like if you can get Ecamm, great, but don't do that first. I think the very first thing to do is, first of all, make sure your camera is aimed at you, right? Like don't come in on the bottom
Yeah.
of the camera because your laptop thing's back. Like that's super easy. Frame yourself so you look like a news reporter, not like, a little kid in a funny movie down in the bottom of the frame, right? So that's super easy. But if you're going to buy something, the first thing to do, like you said, Claudio, get a better microphone. Do you agree?
I wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely wholeheartedly agree. Um, there, there are aspects of the sound, uh, you know, sound, if it doesn't sound proper, if it clips at the upper ranges, or if it's too hollow or something like this, it
Yeah.
really turns us off. And we don't know
It,
why.
we
We
don't
don't
know
know.
why.
Yeah, we don't know
Totally.
why. We just go like, well, that
Yeah.
wasn't really all that enjoyable, that meeting. And, again,
Yeah.
normally we don't pay that close of an attention. So,
Yeah.
yes, I absolutely agree. The sound, it is so important. Yet at the same time, I also believe, and you don't need a new camera. So I totally agree with you on that. But I
Yeah.
also believe that it is a combination between the sound and the sights that we are taking in that
Agreed.
ultimately helps us to process the message. And the amazing thing there is, if you have incongruence, right? If you have
Mm-hmm.
a visual that doesn't match the sound, we actually believe the visual more than the sound. I am not sure. Are you familiar with the McGurk effect?
I am not. Will you tell
Mac,
us about it?
all right, McGurk, and you can Google that. You can go to YouTube and type in McGurk. It's McGurk, and McGurk. He created this experiment where they filmed a person that just said ba 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 ba, and then they shifted and said fa 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 fa. So once ba, once fa. the amazing thing then, and if you find that video on YouTube, you will be flabbergasted how your brain actually works in that respect. Because what they then do is they show the lips mouthing an F, fa, fa, fa,
Uh-huh.
but the speaker
Mhm.
still says ba, ba, ba. And you're looking at it and you say, no, this is impossible. He says fa. And you close your eyes and you only listen, and then you go like, oh, long and behold, that's a B. I did not expect that. And this is a very, very powerful demonstration about being congruent. And again, your target audience, leaders, it is
Yes.
so important that they are congruent, that all of their body language and their facial expressions are really, really in line with the words that come out, because there is some kind of a processing taking place in our brain when there are conflicting signals coming in, where we give more importance to the visual. So
It's
that's a
interesting.
that's a long answer in a way to say, yeah, I absolutely agree about, if you want to spend money on your setup, the first thing, microphone. And I ignored that aspect quite a while. But it is absolutely true. Invest the money in good sound first, but do not let that be a reason to not also take care of the visuals, and
Yeah.
always understand that the combination of both of those two, the visual and the auditory, the combination of both of those two are what makes us appear congruent, and thus much, much more believable.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really good. The McGurk effect. Now, let me loop in another study, and then I think it would fit right in between what we said earlier in the McGurk effect. I read a study a while back where they took people and put them into a theater, and what
Mm.
they had them watch some video, a movie, and they degraded the audio. They just kind of made it grainier and grainier, and
Yep.
worse and worse. People didn't notice that for a long time. And
Hmm.
when they noticed that, they thought the sound had gone bad. And
Ooh,
then
interesting.
they put them in the same thing, and this time they kept the visual perfect, but they degraded the sound. People
Yep,
noticed immediately, and they hated it.
I believe
And
that.
so that to me is, I think that this was one of the big reasons that theaters all across the world just all of a sudden threw down millions of dollars, probably billions globally, to put in things like THX and Dolby, because the audience is listening. That opening piece to a movie where it's unbelievable sound and a really cool effect. So I think that teaches us the primacy of sound. However, if you don't have visuals that match up to that sound,
It-
you suffer from the McGurk effect, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think one of the reasons why that experiment that you just mentioned had the results it had is that perhaps we are paying more attention, and it's more in a conscious level when we process the auditory input that's coming in, rather than the visual, unless it's something that you really, really focus on the visuals first, like let's say going through an art gallery or something like that. But
Yeah.
that is also a very powerful experiment, and I can absolutely believe that, because again, sound, it 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 is something that can be so annoying. Or I
Yeah.
recently had a speaker problem with my MacBook, and the speaker started to sound really tinny, and I had to get this fixed immediately because it was
Yeah.
so
Couldn't.
annoying to me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I believe it. I believe it. Well, so Claudio, I just got to say, now I have a little better understanding of why you are so good at what you do. starting out at 15, you got an unfair advantage. And I think there are people all over the world that benefit from working with you and that getting that unfair advantage as well. I think that's so cool. Now I want to mention, because I just bought it myself, I want to mention your book, which is The Founder's Guide to Presenting. And
Mm-hmm.
people can find that on Amazon. We'll put that link in the show notes. And if can we talk a little bit? I don't want to ruin the book for everybody, but can we talk a little bit about the book and give people an idea of who might benefit from that, besides anybody that's presenting? I
Yeah,
answered it the short way. You answer it the
yeah,
slightly longer way.
yeah, yeah. And that's exactly why it is the founder's guide to presenting, because there are so many books out there. And I always wanted to write a book that deals with the emotional aspects of getting your message across. To get your message not from your mind to another person's mind, but to get your message from your heart to the other person's heart. To me, the emotional aspect is so important. As a matter of fact, the first sentence in the book after the introduction is: the role of emotions in presentations cannot be overstated. Something along that line.
Very, very good. I
Yes.
totally agree.
So to me, that applies to all kinds of communication and especially to presentations. But then I looked out in the market and I said, there are so many books out there. And they may not exactly describe and talk about what I'm talking about in the Founder's Guide to Presenting. But I was like, well, this is such a big field. I might get lost in there. So I wanted to
Mm,
have a more focus and pick basically just one segment of presenters that could benefit from this the very most. And of course, founders and entrepreneurs, especially those that are in a fundraising phase of their development, for them, these presentations, they are do or die presentations. And
yeah.
if you don't get it right, then doors will close. If you get it right, doors will open in ways that you may not even have expected to open. So the
Yeah.
book is really, it starts out, and the first chapter is really all about emotions and how we can make our communication appeal to the emotions on the other side much, much better. And then it goes, of course, into the delivery aspects, into the language aspects, using metaphors and analogies and things like that, the rhetoric devices. Before then, I'm going into the actual investor pitch, dealing with, what are the questions? Because one of the questions that I get the most from new clients, the first question is very often, well, how many slides should my pitch deck have? And to me, that's kind of like asking, how long is a piece of string? It really, really depends on, the specific situation. And
Yeah.
to me, what's more important is to anticipate and know the questions that an investor has on their mind when they listen to a founder, when they listen to some kind of a pitch, and decide whether they want to move on to the next level. Because
Yeah.
so many presenters that are new and just starting out in this field, they have this idea that they need to convince the other person and get them to the point where they commit and where they say, yes, I want to buy or I want to invest or whatever. But when you really, really think about all of these pitches and these sales presentations that we are doing on a daily basis, the goal is really to get to the next step, to start a dialogue by answering most of the questions that they have on their mind, and do it in a way that transfers so much enthusiasm to the other person that they say, you know what, I really, really want to continue this dialogue. This resonates with me. And so the book is really helping people to get to that point.
Which is fabulous. And I want to highlight a couple little things in there from my own experience that I think are just worth. I mean, all of it's worth going much deeper in. And the book's on the way to me. I'm reading it, Claudio. And so one of the things is that that push to get people to say yes in that first meeting. Like, there's nothing I hate more than somebody coming over to give me an estimate on fixing my windows who's like, and if you commit today, we'll give you a 50% off. And if you can't commit today, then that goes away. And I'm like, okay, then don't even talk to me. See you later. I don't even want the estimate. It's like, if that's what we got going on, then don't even come in the door, and I hadn't gotten really present till you said it, to how much that is the temptation as a founder when you go and pitch, right? Like you want them to just love it so much they'll just give you the check before you even leave. That's not how it happens,
Not
right?
at all. Not at all.
And then I have to confess something to you. When I was younger, a lot of times people would say to me, when I was pitching, I raised a lot of money myself with my teams, never myself, but with my teams. And people would say to me on a regular basis, John, I love your enthusiasm and your passion. And I'm telling you, Claudio, for up until I was in my 40s, when I heard that, that's not what I heard, right? That's what they said. But what I heard was, wow, you're not very bright, but you sure are enthusiastic, right? So I really didn't get how much of a difference that makes and how appealing that is to people till I was doing what I do now, starting, 15 years ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit down with these people that were running huge companies or running huge teams at Fortune 50 companies or whatever. And somewhere almost inevitably in our coaching sessions, it would come up and they'd be like, John, I love how passionate you are. And, I'm passionate too, but people don't realize how passionate I am, and first of all, it dawned on me that, maybe I had been hearing the wrong thing all that time. And then the second thing that really hit me was, okay, it really is important. And if you want people to know how passionate you are, you have to tell your face.
Yep. Yep. And I am so glad, I'm really, really glad that you made that shift and that you went back to question how and whether you might have misinterpreted those comments to you, right? Because to me, and this also is something this was 20 plus years ago, probably 25 years ago. Again, Nathan and I, we go back a long time. I know he's a very good friend of you as well, and a fabulous, fabulous guy. And I remember we were driving from San Jose somewhere down to Santa Cruz. And we went through all these beautiful landscapes, and for a guy like me that comes from Europe, to me, this was like, wow, these hills, and then you're getting over the hills, and all of a sudden you see the Pacific, and
it's so beautiful,
beautiful. And I actually made it. I lived in the States for almost 20 years, and I made it almost an annual pilgrimage after that to drive from San Francisco to LA, or from LA to San Francisco on Highway number 1 at least once a year.
It's one of the best things ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Nathan and I are driving through this beautiful landscape. And at one point, the question turned to, what is sales and
Yeah.
what exactly happens? And I just, and I've been using this now ever since then. I said, well, to me, it's very simple. Sales is nothing else than a transfer of enthusiasm.
Oh,
Now, let
good
me
one.
yeah, let me go back a little bit on that one and say, look, we all have had friends that showed us a new gadget that they just bought, or a new software like Ecamm or whatever it is, and they show us the features, they show us the product with such a high level of enthusiasm that at some point, all of a sudden you go like, I want that too. This is so exciting. And so to me, the moment where we actually go from indifference, from, well, I don't care or even no, to a resounding yes, that moment, that split second to me is a transfer of enthusiasm. If we could see emotions, we probably would see a spark flying from one person to the other, and pang, now you've got it. And so, yes, enthusiasm to me is a tremendously important aspect to show that passion. And you did this session at last year's Care 24, or I think it was
Yeah.
2 years ago now. In May 2020 or
Yeah.
September 2020, something like that. And
Yeah.
I saw all of the videos because I helped out with the editing and putting them together. And the video that you presented was one that really, really resonated the most with me, because it's those kind of things where I was like, we are thinking in such similar ways
Yes.
on how communication takes place and how we are convincing others and how we are taking on convictions of our own. And the way that you do it with, going really into the brain and into the instincts that we have at the bottom of it, right? To me, that is just absolutely brilliant. And this, I believe that we are all growing up right now, because for the last 100 years, we have developed technologies that bring us closer and closer together and that make communication easier and easier. I can sit here in Thailand right now. You are up in Utah, and it's like we are sitting in the same room. So the technology isn't a barrier anymore. We can communicate at a moment's notice with anybody, anywhere in the world. So then the question really becomes, how do you communicate? And your approach with going on the instinct level, to me, is something. Again, I'm repeating myself when I say we do not process language consciously, and it is
Agreed.
that part where you can slide in some information in a way that is not only pleasant for the other person, but enlightening. So, yeah.
Yeah. Fabulous. God, it's great to talk with you, Claudio. And I do feel like we're cut from the same cloth, and I'm just glad to know you and Nathan, and all this stuff that you've brought to me. I appreciate it a lot. So what, we're getting close to our time here. There's not
Mhm.
we're getting a little close. So I
Sure.
would love to just see, is there anything else that you're seeing going on out there that you'd like to address, or maybe, another little tidbit takeaway, for someone who's stayed with us this long? What
Yeah,
else comes up?
I think, to me, again, it's a lot of it is about language. And I learned one lesson fairly early on in my life, actually from my mother. And this is that we well, let me tell you the story behind it first.
Yeah.
And that was, my mom was, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, something like that, and she was cooking tripe in a tomato sauce with
Uh-huh.
some potatoes and whatever. And I took one bite of this thing and I said, this is gross. I'm not going to eat this. And, had my little fit, like children do when they are served
Yeah.
something they don't want to eat, and I'm like, no, no, no. And my mom looked at me and she said, no, it is not gross. But I'm also not saying that it is tasty. And that confused me tremendously, especially at that age. I was like, well, how
Right.
can you say that? It is either this or that. And she said, no, it's not. You, Claudio, you just don't like it. I like it. And that's why I cook it. So now eat, that kind of
Yeah.
a thing there. And then years and years and years later, I found out that there is actually a name for this kind of communication principle. It's called E prime. And E prime is a little bit misunderstood. But E prime in a nutshell is to use the English language without the verb to be as an identifier. And the key is as an identifier. And I think this is why it's been a little bit controversial from time to time, but this has the origin in a field called general semantics. General semantics was developed, in the early last century. And then by the late 60s, David Borland came up with E prime, where he basically said, look, we all operate through a model of the world. We do not operate directly on the world, but we operate through a model of the world.
Yes.
And what is something in my model of the world may not be something in your model of the world, or it may be different, right? Like, for example, tripe. Yeah, I don't like it. Somebody else loves it. So fair enough. And
Yeah.
I think if we can start to use E prime and not just eradicating, am, is, ours, but only when they're used as an identifier, we will move into much smoother communication. For example, how many arguments start with, this person is the best president we ever had. No, 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 no. He's the worst president we ever had. And,
Right.
we are fighting. But if I say,
Right.
I consider this person the best president we ever had, whichever person it is and whichever country it is, right? But if
Right.
I'm not saying this is, if I'm not taking my opinion as a fact, but I'm
Right.
actually introducing the observer, I'm introducing myself by saying something like, I consider this person that, right? You cannot fight with me. You cannot say, no, 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 that's not true, because you know.
Right.
So E prime has gotten a little bit lost over the last couple of years. And I bring it up in many, many situations because I think the lessons that we can learn behind it, and it is absolutely difficult to do.
Yeah.
Especially in the spoken language, as you can tell. I just said, this is difficult to do. But if I would apply E prime, right, it would become something like, this seems difficult. And the
Yeah.
amazing thing is, when you apply E prime to your own internal dialogue, you're opening up doors of possibilities, because when you say something like, oh, this is so difficult, I'm never going to get this, then you're automatically shutting down the possibilities. But if you change the language slightly and go like, this appears difficult at the moment, I
Yes.
wonder, what do I need to do to make it easier? All of a sudden you're
Yeah.
opening up. So this is something that I have been training myself, and in the written language, I'm fairly good with it. In the spoken language, it's just something, again, all of us, even if we pay a lot of attention to language and we have some special training, it still is something that even we use unconsciously, and we generate and process the language unconsciously, right? So
Yeah.
that's the tricky part there. But to me, it is something worth exploring for anybody who's in a leadership position. And sometimes it is really, really important to use is as an identifier, because you want to get your model of the world over to other people. But in other situations, perhaps during a review, for example, that's the moment where, as a leader, when you can say, I noticed that instead of you are blah blah blah,
Right,
it
right.
can make a huge, huge, huge difference in how receptive the other person is to the actual message that you want to convey.
Claudio, that is incredibly important. I said that purposefully. um, and here that very thing, E prime as you call it, I genuinely believe that that is a Jedi mind power. It
It
makes,
is.
in my experience, it makes the world more malleable. And I think a lot about the saying that your words create your world.
Exactly.
And I think that what you're saying, if we think about that and take it on in our lives and in our language, the world becomes easier to navigate. It becomes more malleable. It goes from this is hard to this seems hard right now. I wonder what I could do to make it easy. It's and it almost sounds too good to be true, that just changing how you speak about something could actually change the outcome.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more. This is one of the absolute Jedi mind power secrets of life on this planet, I think.
I
And
believe
you're tapped
so.
into it. Yeah.
I absolutely believe so. When I learned about it formally, right? Again, I informally I learned about it from my mother, and she had no idea that there is a formal
Right.
model with a name or anything like that. But she was just
Yeah.
always very, very particular about making sure that I'm not confusing my own model of the world with the
Yeah.
actual world out there, right? That I
It's
do
so
pay
good.
attention to the observer. And when we go back, today, science is leading us more and more into the recognition that there is something about that. I mean, if you look at quantum physics, right, you
Yeah.
cannot say light is a wave or light is a particle. The only
Right.
thing that you really can say is light registers on this instrument as a wave, and light registers on that instrument as a particle. But that
Yeah.
doesn't make it to be either one or the other. So introducing the observer habitually in the communication, I believe, will make it, as you said before, it makes it easier to navigate the journey that we are on here. Because look at any argument. Sometimes, I watch some of these talk shows where people are fighting with each other. Today you just
Right.
have to turn on the news, and you see them
Right.
fighting
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
their heads,
Totally.
you know
Yes.
and then really pay close attention to the language that they are
Mm.
using. And it's all about, my model of the world is the right model. And this is the amazing thing. So many people, they say to me, yeah, I fully understand that we all have our own realities that we work through. but then they behave like their reality is the really correct reality, and everybody else is
Yeah.
kind of a delusional lunatic out there, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. And I believe by using these kind of techniques, again, for our own internal dialogue as well as for communication,
Good
we
point.
are right. We are just making it clear to us and others that this is the understanding of the world that we have. And you can go back to Buddhist, like Zen koans that
Yeah.
try to teach us exactly those kind of lessons. Like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is around to hear it, does it still make a sound? This is a
Right. Yeah.
2,000-year-old koan, and it's basically exactly dealing with the subject that quantum mechanics is dealing with right now, and that is that the observer influences the perception.
Well, and it's funny that you'd say that, because right before you were saying that, it was occurring to me that this is a step on the way to enlightenment. I mean, to get this aspect of the world is a step on the path, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that we would get to enlightenment in our time together, but I maybe I should have guessed, right? If you and I just spend a little bit of time together, we go all kinds of places. So, I think we're coming up on our time, and I want to be respectful. Is there anything else that you would just like to say? Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't? Is there anything I forgot to talk about with you?
No, not at all. The only thing I really want to express again is my gratitude for your invitation, John. This has been a tremendous honor. I consider it a privilege to sit down with you for an entire hour and just shoot the breeze in a way that helps your audience to make perhaps even just out of this 1 hour, there have been 3 or 4 little tips and little nuggets. If they can only grab one of those and maybe start with, talking with you instead of to you as a little experiment, and then just see how people react and how much more they open up in any kind of communication or conversation, and then perhaps go back to the recording and say, okay, now I know, so let me listen a little bit more about E prime or whatever. So to me, it's been a tremendous joy to be here with you, John. I'm a huge fan of the work that you are doing, and again, thank you so much for having me here today.
You are super welcome, Claudio, and thank you. That means a lot to me to hear, coming from you, especially. And obviously, I'm a fan, or I wouldn't have had you on. And I do think that I love that you bring it back to something as simple and yet as important as that thing that we kind of started with. Claudio, it's been really nice talking with you. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for joining us as well. I hope that you've had nearly as good a time as Claudio and I have. And I hope that you really will take a couple of these nuggets, apply them in your life. And listen, if something comes of it, either you have an issue or you have a great success, would you email me, john@executivespeakingsuccess.com, and just say, hey, I listened to you and Claudio. I tried on that speaking with you instead of speaking to you thing. Here's what happened. I would love to hear it. It would be an honor to hear from you. Claudio, thanks again for joining us. Thanks for bringing all this good stuff. And we will see you on speaklikealeader.show next time. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.